time he wanted to visit Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri. And so he undertook the journey. And while he was traveling, it took him a while to reach Puri, and he walked alone through the Jadikanda forest. And while he was traveling, he would drink whatever water was available, and he would eat whatever fruits or leaves or anything. Mostly he was fasting during his journey. And we all know that even today, if we come to India and if we drink water, which is not, we don't drink bottled water or RO water, immediately we become ill if we just drink water from any random tap. And he was just drinking from ponds and streams. And because of that, he developed an infection all over his body. And because of this infection, he had boils on his body, and those bodies were always oozing blood and pus and very foul smelling liquids. So this happened to him while he was going to Puri, to have darshan of the Lord. And he started becoming very depressed by this situation. And because of his condition, Srila Sanatana Goswami decided that the best thing to do would be to just arrive at Puri. And when the Rath Yatra celebration were to take place, he would throw himself under the wheels of Lord Jagannath's cart in the presence of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and commit suicide. And he said, well, this will be the best way for me to attain some type of, fitting destiny, despite the fact that I'm so fallen. So ultimately, Sanatana Goswami, he reached Jagannath Puri. And when he got to Puri, he started inquiring from different people, where does Haridas Thakur stay? And he had a thought in his mind. He was thinking, I've heard that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's residence is very close to the temple. And it will be impossible for me to visit his place because near to the temple, the servants of Lord Jagannath are always very busily passing through the streets. And if I were to touch any of Jagannath's servants with my very foul and diseased body, it would be a very, very great offense. So he started asking for the residence of Haridas Thakur. And he knew Haridas, and he went and he met Haridas Thakur. And he inquired about Lord Chaitanya. And Haridas said, well, very soon, I think Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will be coming here. Because Lord Chaitanya had this habit, he would go for all the darshans at the Jagannath temple every day. And the priests at the temple, they would always give him so much Mahaprasadam. And he would bring this Mahaprasadam and he would feed Haridas Thakur. So he said, I expect that Lord Chaitanya soon will be reaching this place. And just at that moment, Lord Chaitanya came. And Haridas and Sanatan Goswami, they turned when they saw the Lord, and then they just fell down flat like sticks on the ground. And they began offering prayers to Lord Chaitanya. And then Haridas stood up and he said, my dear Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this person who is offering his obeisances to you is Sanatana Goswami. And when Lord Chaitanya heard that, he became very, very happy. He just became filled with joy. And he told Sanatan, he said, please get up. And Sanatan, he got up, but his body was covered with his sores and with all of that liquid. And Lord Chaitanya came to embrace Haridas Thakur. And when that happened, you know, Haridas, he felt great shame. He said, I am such an offender. So at any rate, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sat down and they sat at his feet. And Lord Chaitanya looked at Sanatana and he inquired, he said, how have you been? He said, I can see that your health is not so good, you know. How's your situations going? Is everything auspicious? Is your consciousness good? Is your Krishna consciousness developing? Which is always, you know, our prime interest when we meet one another. You know, we're not so much interested when devotees come together, we're not so much interested in just talking about finance or politics, but we're very interested in how we can advance in Krishna consciousness. So Sanatan, he told him, he said, because I'm seeing you here today, my life has become perfect and auspicious. Then Lord Chaitanya told Sanatan, he said, well, just 10 days ago, he said, just 10 days ago, your brother Rupa Goswami, he left this place to go back to Vrindavan. And he had been here with your younger brother, Anupam. Anupam's name was also Sri Ballabha. And he said, I have to inform you that your brother Sri Ballabha, he's passed away and he is no more. And then they began to speak about, Sanatana Goswami began to speak to Lord Chaitanya about how Sri Ballabha, Anupam, had been such a great devotee of Lord Ramachandra, and how he and Rupa Goswami, they always used to test him in so many ways. They would say, Anupam, you stay together forever with myself and Rupa Goswami, and we will always sit and we will discuss the topics of Krishna. We will hear Srimad Bhagavatam together. We will engage in Krishna Katha, and we'll chant the holy names of the Lord. And Sanatana Goswami reported to Lord Chaitanya that when Sri Ballabha would hear that, naturally he would become very enthused and he would say, yes, yes. And he would say, I will beg you to initiate me in Krishna mantra, and I will worship Lord Krishna with all my heart. But then Sanatan told the Lord that Anupam would go home in the evening and he would start thinking about this proposal to worship Lord Krishna as opposed to worshiping Lord Ramachandra. And And he said, and Anupam would come back in the next morning and he would say, it's impossible for me to change my love from, loving Raghunath, and chanting Ram Nam. He said, it's just an impossible thing for me to do. And Lord Chaitanya was listening to this, and he was smiling the whole time. And when Sanatan finished speaking, he said, yes. He said, in Navadvip, I had a similar situation to that with Murari Gupta. And we know that Murari Gupta is one of the great devotees of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He was a Vaidya, and he lived in Mayapur. He's a devotee of Lord Ram. And Lord Chaitanya always used to say, look, why are you chanting Ram Nam? Why are you worshiping Raghunath? He would test his faith. And Murari would come back and say the same thing. I've sold my head to the feet of Raghunath. How can I give that up? And so Lord Chaitanya concluded this by, he made a statement in talking about Shraddha, or the faith that devotees have in their worshipable deities or their Istadevs. And Mahaprabhu, he said, glorious is the devotee who does not give up the shelter of the Lord, and glorious is the Lord who will never abandon his servant. If by chance a servant falls down and goes somewhere else, glorious is that master who catches his servant by his hair and brings him back. So Lord Chaitanya, he said, I used to test Murari, but his faith was so strong in the Lord, he would never change. And so then Lord Chaitanya, he said, it's very good that you have come. I'm happy to see you. I'm very, pleased that you're here. You stay here with Haridas Thakur and you always relish Krishna Katha together. So that was Sanatan's arrival in Jagannath Puri. And he still had this thought going on that I think it would be quite auspicious if I were to commit suicide, under the wheels of the Jagannath cart in front of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I mean, in one sense, it does sound like an auspicious thing to do, but Lord Chaitanya didn't approve of that. And one day, Lord Chaitanya, he came to the Siddha Bakul where they were living. And quite unexpectedly, he just, without any prompting, he just looked up at Sanatan and he said, Sanatan, if I could attain Krishna by committing suicide, I would give up millions of bodies without hesitation. He said, but you cannot attain Krishna by giving up the body. Krishna is only attainable if one performs pure devotional service, no other means. And we know that that's the fact. There are so many statements in the Shastra and the Lord himself in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, Bhakti Mam Abhijanati. It's only by bhakti that I can be attained. It's not by karma, it's not by jnana, it's not by yoga. We can't attain the Lord by just performing tapasya. We can't attain the Lord by just giving in charity. We can't attain the Lord just by performing yoga. But it's only by bhakti. because bhakti removes everything which is inauspicious from the heart. And because you all read Srila Prabhupada's books, you know the heart is a resting place of many inauspicious things, such as lust and anger and greed and illusion and envy. But the process of bhakti yoga, based on the 9 activities of bhakti and primarily based upon chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, this is what fully cleanses the heart. And it makes it spotlessly pure, where we can receive Krishna's mercy and then engage in Krishna's pure devotional service. So Lord Chaitanya said, no, Sanatan, your idea about suicide is not a good idea. He said, suicide is an act of ignorance. Suicide is an act of darkness, is an act of passion, but only by pure goodness and devotional service can Krishna be attained. But then interestingly, Lord Chaitanya, he gave a nuance to his statement. And he looked at Sanatan and he said, Sanatan, but you know that sometimes, due to intense feelings of separation from Krishna, an exalted devotee may want to give up his body. But by that type of ecstatic devotional service, one gains direct audience of Krishna, and then he cannot give up his body. And then he said, one who is deeply in love with Krishna cannot tolerate separation from the Lord. Therefore, such a devotee always desires his own death. And Lord Chaitanya, he gave a few nice examples of this, talking about highly advanced Vaishnavas who feel separation from Krishna and therefore desire their own death. And he gives 2 examples. And one example is Srimati Rukmini Devi, and the other example are the gopis of Braja. And the example of Srimati Rukmini Devi is told in the verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam. O lotus-eyed one, great personalities like Lord Shiva desire to bathe in the dust of your lotus feet to drive away ignorance. If I do not get the mercy of your lordship, I shall observe vows to reduce my duration of life, and thus I shall give up bodies for hundreds of births if it is possible to get your mercy in that way. And we know that that was part of the letter that Rukmini Devi sent with the Brahmin to Krishna at the time of her Swayamvar. And it was just about ready to be married to, I think it was Shishupala, somebody correct me if I'm wrong. And just before this, she sent that letter, and the Brahmin somehow very quickly got to where Krishna was, delivered that letter, and Krishna came and saved Rukmini. But she said, I love you so much that if you don't give me your mercy, said, I will take vows to reduce the duration of my life and just practically speaking, kill myself. And I will give up bodies for hundreds and hundreds of births if it's possible for me to get your mercy in that way. And then the other example that Lord Chaitanya gave was of the Braja Gopis. And their statement is this: "O dear Krishna, by your smiling glances and your melodious talk, you have awakened a fire of lusty desire within our hearts. Now you should extinguish that fire with a stream of nectar from your lips by kissing us. Kindly do this. Otherwise, dear friend, the fire within our hearts will burn our bodies to ashes because of separation from you. Thus, by meditation, we shall claim shelter at your lotus feet." So we know that during the Sharadiya Rasa, Krishna, he went to the banks of the Jamuna and he stood beneath the Bangsibat tree and he played his flute. And at the time of that flute vibration spreading out through Vrindavan, then all the young girls of Vrindavan, they became completely maddened and they just began to give up everything to go to Krishna. You've read that description in the Bhagavatam, you've read that description in the Krishna book. The young ladies of Vrindavan, they left their mothers, they left their fathers, they left their family, they left their children. It's described that they didn't even dress themselves properly or put their cosmetics properly. And they just ran madly to be with Krishna. And then when they did meet Krishna, you know, Krishna very cunningly, he looked up and he said, "Welcome." He said, "I hope that everything is auspicious for you." And then he said, "Now you should go back home." And basically they were determined that they weren't going to go back home. And then even later, you know, well, after the rasa dance had begun, Krishna abandoned them and abandoned Sri Radha also. And they were all burning so much in a fire of separation from their beloved that they felt like their life was just coming to the end. But the nature of their separation from Krishna is the more they felt that separation, the more they were absorbed in thought of Krishna, and consequently they were in ecstasy through the personal association with Krishna. And we know that after that, Krishna returned and he told them, he said, "Please do not misunderstand me." He said, the nature of your love is the most exalted form of love. He said, it is so exalted that even though I promise that I will always reciprocate the loving moods of all individuals, your love is so great that I cannot reciprocate your love. Therefore, please just be satisfied by your service. So Lord Chaitanya said, well, if you're advanced, and if you have feelings either like Rukmini or you have feelings like the Braja Gopis, then you will want to give up your body. He said, but all other considerations is simply in the mode of darkness. So Sanatana Goswami, he understood that Lord Chaitanya really didn't appreciate his ideas about suicide. And And Sanatana Goswami began to speak to the Lord. And it's interesting that basically in each of the sections where Sanatan speaks to the Lord in this pastime, he always begins by saying, I'm lowborn. He quite honestly acknowledges like his fallen condition. He never presents himself as being like a noble Vaishnava of character, but from his true Vaishnav dainya and humility, he always begins, every time he speaks to the Lord, he says, I'm a very fallen person. And he said, I am lowborn. Indeed, I'm the lowest. He said, I am condemned because I have all the characteristics of a sinful man. And he looked at Lord Chaitanya and he said, sir, he said, if you keep me alive, what will your profit be? And then this is a very nice section. He says, if you keep me alive, my dear Lord, what will your profit be? He said, I served Hussein Shah. I was complicit in the things that Hussein Shah was doing. I developed so many bad qualities. Why do you want to keep me alive? And then Lord Chaitanya, very compassionately, he looks at Sanatana Goswami, and in essence, he says, I have a mission for you that I want to execute through your body. And then he begins to explain he looks at Sanatana and he says, you have surrendered to me. In the act of surrender, you have given yourself to me. Therefore, your body is my property. So how could you even conceive of doing something to the property of somebody else? Your body is mine. You surrendered. And that should really be the mood of all of us as we engage in devotional service. In our process of surrender to our Guru Parampara, we give our bodies, we give our minds, we give our words, we give our Shakti to the spiritual master, to the Guru Parampara. Ultimately, we're offering everything to Krishna. Or as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has sung, Manasa Deho Geho Jo Kichumor, Arpilo Tua Padi Nanda Kishore. He says, O Nanda Kishore, O my beloved son of Nanda Maharaj, Manasa, Deho, Geho, whatever I have in my life, it is all yours. Therefore, it is only meant to be used in your devotional service. And so Lord Chaitanya said, how can you have any claim to your body? Because you have already given it to me by your act of surrender. And then he just looks at Sanatan and he speaks to him very directly. And he says, your body is the principal instrument that I'm going to use to execute many activities. He said, by your body, Sanatan, I am going to carry out many tasks. And then he tells Sanatan specifically what he's supposed to do. He says, you will have to ascertain the basic principles of what is a devotee. You will have to ascertain the basic principles of what is devotional service. You will have to ascertain the basic principles of what is love of God, Vaishnava duties, and Vaishnava characteristics. And then he says, you will also have to explain Krishna's devotional service, establish centers for the cultivation of love for Krishna, and excavate the lost places of pilgrimage and teach people how to adopt the renounced order of life. So Srila Prabhupada, he gives a commentary, and he says that Sanatana Goswami was so great a Vaishnava that Lord Chaitanya, said, this is what you're going to do. He said, you have to ascertain, what is devotional service? What is a devotee? And what is love of Godhead? And Prabhupada says that to do that, Sanatan wrote the first book that the Goswamis wrote, which is Brihad Bhagavatamritam, which explains what a devotee is and what are the basic principles of devotional service, and explains the highest attainment, which is love of God. And then he said, you have to explain what are the duties of a Vaishnava and what are Vaishnava characteristics. And to do that, Srila Sanatana Goswami, he wrote the Hari Bhakti Vilas, which is really, the book of the culture of Vaishnava activities. And then he told Sanatana Goswami, he said, you will have to excavate the lost places of Krishna's pastimes. And we know that when Rupa and Sanatan and the other Goswamis, when they lived together in Vrindavan, this is what they did. They gathered all scriptures. And by those scriptures, they extracted the essence of all scriptures, which is pure bhakti, how to engage in devotional service, how to act like a devotee. And then, from the scripture and through their revelation and through their performance of pure bhajan in Vrindavan, they rediscovered the places of Krishna's pastimes. And then Lord Chaitanya said, you have to establish institutions by which people can learn to love and serve Krishna. And to do that, Sanatana Goswami established the temple of Madan Mohan in Vrindavan, and which Prabhupada says was the first temple that was built over here. And the deity of Madan Mohanji was established there. That Madan Mohan deity, he left Vrindavan when Aurangzeb's armies came here, and now he lives in Karoli, which is about halfway across to Jaipur. First he went to Jaipur with everybody else, but then the daughter of the king of Karoli fell madly in love with him. And so he came and he lives in Karoli. So Sanatana Goswami established that temple. And then Lord Chaitanya, he looked at Sanatana and he said, please try to understand, Sanatana. Mathura Vrindavan is my most dear abode. And he said, in that place, I want you to do so many things to preach Krishna consciousness. It's not actually possible for me to go there because after I took sannyas, uh, my mother Sachi, she ordered me to stay someplace that was nearby, and she thought that Puri would be a good place for me to stay. Because by staying close in Puri, when the Bengali devotees come down, they can return with news to Sachi, and I can send Mahaprasad to Sachi. He said, it's not possible for me to stay all the time in Mathura and Vrindavan, but this is what I want you to do. He said, I have all of this work to do through your body. He said, but Sanatan, you want to give up your body. How can I tolerate that? It's just not possible. And at that time, Sanatan, he just bowed his head and he said, my dear Lord, he said, I just offer my respectful obeisances to you. He said, it's not possible for me to understand the deep plans that you have within the heart, within your heart. And he said, a wooden doll, he chants and dances according to the direction of a magician or a person who's operating the wooden doll. He said, and he doesn't know, the wooden doll himself, he doesn't know, how he's moving, and he doesn't know how he's dancing. He said, and this is the same way it is with me. He said, I'm just in ignorance. I don't really understand, Lord, all the things that you want me to do. And then Lord Chaitanya flipped at that moment, flipped the conversation at that moment, and then he addressed Haridas Thakur. And Haridas Thakur was sitting there. You can only imagine when devotees are being spoken to so lovingly and being given such a profound mission by the Lord himself. And Haridas is just sitting and he's relishing seeing this mercy that's being given to Sanatana Goswami. And once again, this is the way we should be as Vaishnavas. When we see, devotees receiving an abundance of Krishna's mercy, we should relish that. When we see devotees performing immense amounts of devotional service, we should relish that. When we see devotees performing their bhajan and chanting and reading and doing everything so nicely, we should always relish that. When we see devotees receiving grace from the spiritual master, we should relish that. Never feel envious, but always relish. And Haridas is sitting there and he's just looking, at all of this mercy that's being given to Sanatana Goswami. And then Lord Chaitanya turns and he addresses Haridas Thakur. And Lord Chaitanya, just very casually, he looks up and he says, my dear Haridas, what are we supposed to do? He said, this gentleman here, he wants to destroy the property that belongs to another person. He said, if somebody has entrusted you with his property, you can't destroy it, you can't sell it, you can't do anything with it. He says, Haridas, you please tell Sanatana Goswami not to do such an unlawful thing that he's thinking about. And Haridas, he's so humble. When Lord Chaitanya, when he said that, Haridas said, he said, Lord, we are falsely proud of our capabilities. He said, none of us are able to understand your deep intentions. He says, unless you actually inform us what we're supposed to do, or what your purpose is, or who you want to do your purposes through, we cannot understand that. And then Haridas just folded his hands. He said, but my dear sir, you are a very, very great personality, and you have accepted Sanatan Goswami. And because of you accepting Sanatan, he is the most fortunate person on the earth. He says, this is all that I have to say. Who can be more fortunate than Sanatan Goswami? And so at that time, Lord Chaitanya, he decided that he had pushed that particular point enough. And he said, now please pardon me. I will go and I will perform my noon duties, and then we will meet again later. And that brings us into another beautiful aspect of this pastime, because now we have two pure devotees. We have Sanatan Goswami and we have Haridas Thakur, and they're going to share their thoughts about what has just happened. And we know that as devotees, that should be our mood also. We should be able to open our minds in confidence. And we should be able to reveal confidential things to our close friends. We should share our secret thoughts and our revelations in Krishna consciousness. And so then first, Haridas begins to speak. And he says, my dear Sanatan Goswami, you are the most fortunate person on the earth. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has just told us that your body is his body. He says you cannot do with your body what you want to do, because he has so many things that he wants to do with your body in Mathura. He says, and whatever the Lord wants to be done, that will be successful. And that's a nice point, that whatever the Lord wills to be done will be successful. I mean, just, as a frame of reference for all of us who are members of ISKCON, we can just look to the example of Srila Prabhupada. Whatever the Lord wants to be done, it will become successful. I mean, Prabhupada was such an elderly man. He was such a cultured, renounced, yet aristocratic individual. He only had 40 rupees. He sailed to America on a boat. He almost died twice on the way. He came to a land where the culture was quite barbarian as opposed to the culture that he'd grown up in and had come from, living in his room at Radha Damodar Temple in Vrindavan, 1965, 57 years ago. Knew only one person by name in America, but he lived in such a remote place. Prabhupada said, I will never be able to start a movement living in this remote place. And on his own, he went to New York. And it seems like a situation, which is not going to work. 70-year-old man, 40 rupees in his pocket, just some books. But whatever the Lord wants, it becomes successful. And Prabhupada had that exclusive faith on the Lord. He was driven by that exclusive faith on the Lord. And that letter that he wrote, and that poem that he wrote, he said, you've given me the name Bhakti Vedanta. He said, neither do I have bhakti, nor do I have knowledge. He said, but I have strong faith on the holy name of the Lord. I know that by the grace of the holy name, everything will be accomplished. So Haridas said, Sanatan, if the Lord wants it, it's going to happen. Please do not worry. And then Sanatan Goswami, he's listening to these words of his friend Haridas, and then he turns to Haridas and he says, my dear Haridas Thakur, who is equal to you? He said, of all of Lord Chaitanya's followers and of all of Lord Chaitanya's disciples, you are the most fortunate. And then then Sanatan said, the mission for which Lord Chaitanya came to this world is to spread the importance of chanting the holy names. And Haridas, Lord Chaitanya is doing that through you. And I should say that Haridas, he prefaced his comments to Sanatan speaking about his fallen condition. Because we know that Haridas was born in a Muslim family. And Haridas said, I am wretched, I am fallen, I cannot do any service for the Lord, I'm an outcast. And he glorified Sanatan. And then Sanatan says, actually, he says, who is equal to you? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to this world to give each and every soul the opportunity for perfection, and to give each and every soul throughout the universe the opportunity to attain prema bhakti simply through the chanting of the holy name. Irregardless of what a person's position is, if a person takes this holy name, their lives can become perfected. And he told Haridas, he said, and Lord Chaitanya is personally doing this through you. He said, look, Haridas, he said, I know that every day you're chanting 300,000 holy names of the Lord, and you're telling each and every person to chant the holy name. Now, we can think about that. You know, we all of us have considered that. But 300,000 names is 64 rounds 3 times, 3 sets of 64 rounds in the day. Haridas Thakur was practically speaking chanting 24 hours a day. He was always chanting. Earlier in Anjalila, the glories of Haridas Thakur are described. And there are 2 instances where Haridas Thakur was tested. One instance is because although he was from a Muslim family, he was so famous as a Vaishnava. And everybody loved him so much. And there was a local tax collector, and his name was Ramachandra Khan. And Ramachandra Khan, he was becoming very envious of Haridas because people were giving him so much respect and they were giving him so much love. And so he thought, well, what shall I do? He said, I have to discredit this man in some way. And so his decision was to send a prostitute to entice Haridas Thakur. And he called all the prostitutes from his village and one very beautiful young girl who was very, very famous for what she did. She said, I will go there. I will accomplish this act. And so she went to the place where Haridas was. And Haridas was living in a cave on the banks of the Ganga. And he just had a tulsi plant, and he would sit by his tulsi plant. He would chant Hare Krishna 64 rounds, 3 times a day, chanting the holy name with love, chanting the holy name with total absorption. And this young girl came, and she was acting in a very provocative way. And she told Haridas, she said, I've come here to enjoy with you. And Haridas said, oh yes, thank you, that is very nice. He said, but I have my vow to finish my chanting of the holy names. And as soon as my vow is finished, then certainly your desire will become fulfilled. And so he said, please, you sit here and you look at Tulsi, and I will just sit here and I will work on finishing my japa. And he chanted all night long with so much love, so much deep love. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And sometimes that young girl, she would hear the chanting of Haridas, and she would chant Hare Hare, Hare Hare. And the end of the night came. And Haridas said, please forgive me. He said, I could not finish my fixed number of rounds. But if you come back again, surely I will finish my rounds. So she left that place and she went and she reported to Ramachandra Khan what she had done. She said, surely I will be able to get him tonight. And again, she went back, and in the presence of Tulsi Devi and hearing Haridas's chanting, she just sat and she listened. And she was chanting Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And little did she know that she was becoming purified in the association of Krishna's pure devotee, the holy name, and Srimati Tulsi Devi. And she went back the next morning and she reported to Ramachandra Khan, yes, tonight will be the night that I can report to you. And she came back the third night and she just listened to Haridas chanting all night long with such a heart of love, crying out for Krishna, that at the end of the night, she looked at him and said, sir, I have to tell you why I've been sent here. And Haridas said, he said, my dear girl, he said, from the time that you came, I knew why you had been sent here. He said, please, or she looked up and said, but my heart has changed. She said, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And Haridas told her, said, what you can do is this. You go, and all of the wealth that you've attained through your bad means, you should give that away in charity. You should come back here. You should live by this Tulsi Devi, and you should chant the holy names of the Lord. And she did that. She went, she distributed everything that she had, she shaved her head, she took simple sari, she came back chanting the holy name, and she became a great Vaishnavi, great pure devotee of the Lord. And Haridas left that place. And this Ramachandra Khan, he became very upset. He was an envious man. And later, Lord Nityananda came to that village. And Lord Nityananda's devotees requested a place for Nitai to stay. And Ramachandra Khan said, I have no place for a person like that to stay in my village. he can stay in the cowshed. And when he said that, Nitai just left the place. And then what happened was very inauspicious. Ramachandra Khan was a tax collector, and he was supposed to be collecting tax on behalf of Hussein Shah. And he wasn't giving the proper amount of tax to Hussein Shah. And so the government tax collector came down to Ramachandra Khan. And Chaitanya Charitamrita says that in the Durga Mandap, or the Durga temple in Ramachandra Khan's house, they slaughtered an animal right on the altar of Durga. And then they burnt the whole village. And his family perished for making an offense to Nitai and making an offense to Haridas Thakur. Then there was another incident where Haridas Thakur, he was chanting, and then one extraordinarily beautiful lady came to entice Haridas. And Chaitanya Charitamrita describes that this lady was extraordinarily beautiful, and it was basically the same thing. And Haridas said, please, you just wait, and till I finish my chanting. And that went on for 2 or 3 days. And at the end of the night, this lady looked up and she said, actually, do you know who I am? And Haridas folded his hands and he said, yes, Mother Parvati, I know exactly who you are, and I know that you've come here to test me. And she looked at Haridas and she said, my husband millennia ago engaged me in the chanting of the name of his worshipful Lord, who is Ram. But I see that you get so much undescribable sweetness in this chanting of Krishna's holy name. I wish that you will initiate me in the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And Haridas Thakur just looked at Parvati Devi and said, Hare Krishna, chant the holy names. So Sanatana Goswami is telling Haridas, you chant 300,000 names a day and you tell everyone about chanting. And then he makes a very good point. He said, Haridas, some people behave very well, but they don't preach the message of Krishna consciousness. And then he turned it around and he said, Haridas, also, some people preach quite nicely, but they don't behave very nicely. And he said, but you are doing both by your personal behavior and your preaching. And then Sanatana Goswami, he folded his hands and looked at Haridas. He said, therefore, you are the spiritual master of the world and the most advanced Vaishnava in the whole world. He said, you're not just preaching, but not practicing. And it's not that you're just practicing, but not preaching, but you're chanting and you're telling people to chant and you're following so nicely. Therefore, you are the most advanced Vaishnava in the whole universe. And naturally, Haridas was overwhelmed. But it was 2 devotees together. Very sweet exchange of love and appreciation between 2 devotees. And we should always have these sweet exchanges of love and appreciation, when we get together with one another. So after this, Sanatana Goswami, he relished the Rath Yatra in Jagannath Puri, and all of the great Vaishnavas from Bengal came, and Lord Chaitanya took it upon himself to personally introduce Sanatan to all of the great Vaishnavas. And Kaviraj Goswami says that because Sanatana Goswami was so exalted in his Vaishnava character. He was so learned as a Vaishnava, and he was so practical as a Vaishnava that all of the devotees, they loved him immediately. And it said that the Vaishnavas blessed him with Maitri, which is friendship, and Kripa, which is mercy, and honor, which is so wonderful. I mean, this is a characteristic of devotees. When we meet other devotees, we want to have friendship with devotees. We want to receive mercy of devotees. And we love to show honor and respect to all Vaishnavas, you know, from high to low. We don't discriminate. We don't discriminate chronologically. We don't discriminate because of one's position. We want to give honor to each and every living being. So then the devotees, then they returned back to Bengal, and Sanatan stayed with the Lord. Sanatan, you know, he was going through a lot of tests, but the Lord wanted him to be there. And another pastime that happened with Sanatan was during the month of May and June in Jagannath Puri. And all of us know that May and June means super hot over here. I have to say that this winter, we all felt like it was the most miserably cold winter that any of us had experienced for a long time. And we were all hankering for the warmth to come. And we're all agreeing now that the hot season has come on really, really fast, and it's come on quite strong. Somebody was telling me that a recorded temperature over here yesterday was about 43 degrees. It's already getting hot here. Nights are still pleasant, but the days are quite hot. So during May, the months of May and June, the Lord decided to give a test to Sanatana Goswami. And what was happening is that the Lord was called to Yameshwar Tota, who's one of the ancient and prominent Shiva temples in Puri. And he was having his lunch there at midday. And so the Lord, he called, he said, somebody call Sanatana Goswami and tell him that I want him to come and have lunch with me. So the word got to Sanatan. And Sanatan, when he heard this, his happiness just exploded. Lord Chaitanya is calling me. And so what he did is, from the place where he was staying, he immediately ran to Lord Chaitanya. But the way that he ran was on the beach across the sand. And there are two ways that he could have gone there. He could have gone by the Singhadwara, which is the main eastern gate of the Jagannath temple, which is basically, it would have been cool, at least some shade on that side. But he just darted across the sand and he came to Lord Chaitanya's place. And the sand was just as hot as fire. It was just as hot as fire, burning Sanatan's feet, blistering Sanatan's feet. But nevertheless, he just ran like the wind to be with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And when he reached, Lord Chaitanya was resting, and Lord Chaitanya's servant Govinda gave the remnants of Lord Chaitanya's prasad to Sanatan, and Sanatan was just in bliss. And then Lord Chaitanya came, and he spoke to Sanatan, and he said, Sanatan, he said, by which path have you come to this place today? And Sanatan looked up and he said, Lord, I came the path on the beach. He said, that's how I came today. And the Lord said, you came on the beach? He said, but the hot sand, it must have blistered your feet and you cannot walk. How do you tolerate something like that? And Sanatan Goswami said, you know, Lord, I don't feel much pain. He said, I don't feel much pain. He said, and besides, he said, I don't have any right to pass by the Singhadwara gate of the temple. He said, because Jagannath's servants are always coming in that area. And if somehow or other I touch one of the servants while I have this disease on my body, he said, certainly I will be doomed. And then Lord Chaitanya listened to Sanatan speaking in that way. And Lord Chaitanya became so happy inside of his heart. And he replied, he said, my dear Sanatan, although you are the deliverer of the entire universe, and even though the demigods and great saints are purified by touching you, it is a characteristic of a devotee to observe and protect the Vaishnava etiquette. Maintenance of the Vaishnava etiquette is the ornament of a devotee. And that's another real principle for all of us aspiring devotees. Maintenance of the Vaishnava etiquette is the ornament of a devotee. This ornament we should wear, always properly following Vaishnava etiquette, always properly following Vaishnava culture. And he told Sanatan, he said, you're the deliverer of the whole universe. You are so exalted. He said, even the Devtas, they want to take the dust from your feet. He said, but you have made it such a principle to observe this etiquette. He said, I am so pleased with you. And he said, if a person transgresses the laws of etiquette, people will make fun of him and he will be punished in this world and in the next. And he said, Sanatan, by your observance of Vaishnava etiquette, you have satisfied my mind. Who else but you could show this example? And then Lord Chaitanya, he couldn't control himself. And he just got up and he grabbed Sanatan Goswami and he embraced him. And then all of that oozing business started to come out of Sanatan's body and go into the body of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And, you know, Sanatan would always forbid the Lord, no, don't touch me. Please don't touch me. You know, I'm offending you by allowing this to come on your body. Still, the Lord would grab Sanatan and embrace him. And so Sanatan was just really distressed. He said, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'm having a real crisis here. And so the next day, Jagadananda Pandit came to the place where Sanatan was, and he met Sanatan and he met Haridas Thakur. And then there was a discussion that Sanatan had, and he was basically opening his heart to Jagadananda, and he was saying, Prabhu, please listen. He said, I came to Jagannath Puri. I wanted to commit suicide. Lord Chaitanya, he knew my heart. He's the omniscient, supreme personality of Godhead. He knows the heart of everyone. Just, quite out of the blue, quite randomly, he just started explaining to me why I couldn't commit suicide. I have these sores on my body. He's always embracing me. I don't know what to do. I'm making his body become so dirty and nasty. And he has told me that he has many things for me to do in Vrindavan. What should I do? What should I do? And so then Jagadananda Pandit, he listened and he said, Prabhu, he said, I think the best thing is that, after the Rath Yatra is finished, then you should just leave and go to Vrindavan. Mahaprabhu has said that he wants to work through your body, so you go to Vrindavan and you begin your work. So that sort of gave some peace to the heart of Sanatana Goswami. And then the next day, Lord Chaitanya came to see Sanatana and Haridas. And Sanatana Goswami, he looked at Lord Chaitanya and he said, Lord, because of my situation, he said, I think that the best thing for me to do is that, as soon as Rath Yatra is finished, I'm going to leave, I'm going to go to Vrindavan, and I'm going to start to execute the work that you've given to me. And Lord Chaitanya looked up and he said, where did you get this idea? He says, who has given you this idea? And Sanatana said, well, I was speaking to Jagadananda Pandit, and Lord Chaitanya just basically exploded. And he said, who is this Jaga? They didn't even call him Jagadananda. He said, who is this Jaga? He says, Sanatana, you are so advanced. You're in a position of being an advisor even to myself. You are such a learned scholar. This Jagadananda is a new boy. Why is he, instructing you in this way? He said, Jagadananda Pandit, he's just a very naughty boy. He said, why is he doing this? He said, it's just another example of somebody not following the proper Vaishnava etiquette. He said, he's not recognizing your position. He's speaking over his head. He's speaking beyond his adhikari. Lord Chaitanya, he became very, very upset. And let's see. Yeah, Lord Chaitanya, he was very angry. And he was just chastising Jagadananda Pandit. And Sanatana Goswami, when he heard Lord Chaitanya chastising Jagadananda Pandit, he said, now I can see the true fortune of a Vaishnava, like Jagadananda Pandit. He said, with him, he can receive your praise. He can receive your chastisement. You offer him praise. You offer him chastisement. You never chastise me. He said, I'm not a fully accepted, disciple. You only heap praise on me. He said, no one in this world is as fortunate as Jagadananda. And he said, by chastising, you make Jagadananda drink the nectar of affectionate relationships. But because you only offer me honorable praise all the time, it's like you're giving me neem juice to drink. That's the actual situation. he said, really, Lord, I think it is my unfortunate position that you have not accepted me in a position to have intimate relationships with you. But then the Lord spoke. And he said, Sanatan, please, you should never think that Jagadananda is more dear to me than you. He said, but the actual point is this. When people begin to disregard Vaishnava etiquette, this I cannot tolerate. He says, it gives me so much pain. He said, you have the experience of Shastra. He says, Jaga is just a young boy. You have the power to even convince me. And in many places, you have already convinced me about ordinary dealings and devotional service. And we know that from reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, that when Lord Chaitanya first met Sanatan and Rupa, and he gave them initiation, Lord Chaitanya's plan was to go to Vrindavan, and Sanatan said, no, Lord, please. He said, you can't go to Vrindavan with this huge army of people going along with you. He said, Vrindavan is a very solitary place. He said, you should go there on your own at a different time. And Lord Chaitanya accepted his good advice. He said, I offer you praise, not because I think of you as being outside of an intimate relationship with me, but I offer you praise because you are so qualified that a person is forced to praise you. He said, I'm not just making it up, Sanatan. You're such a qualified individual. It is my obligation to praise you because of the good qualities that you have. And then he looked at Sanatan and he said, you know, Sanatan, I want to tell you something. He said, your body is transcendental. Your body is not material. He said, and actually, I think of your body just like it is nectar. And then Lord Chaitanya, he begins a little back and forth with Sanatan. And, you know, he makes the point that the only good actually is with Krishna and devotional service. And if one is thinking that something is good or something is bad on the material platform, he says it's just all mental speculation. And he says, I'm in the renounced order of life. And he said, my position is I cannot make any distinction. I should be equipoised. And my knowledge, my perspective of life, Sanatan, should be equally disposed to sandalwood pulp and to dirty mud. And for this reason, I could never reject you. He said, even if I hated you, he said, I would deviate from my position of being a person who's supposed to be equipoised all the time. So this discussion is going on. It's like Lord Chaitanya is just really opening up his heart and telling Sanatan how much he loves him, how much he, you know, honors him. And he said, look, I'm supposed to be a sannyasi. I'm supposed to be equipoised. He said, I have to be equally disposed to sandalwood paste and to mud. He said, that's the situation that my consciousness should be in. And then very respectfully, out of the blue, Haridas Thakur, he says, my dear Lord, he said, what you have spoken deals with external formalities. I do not agree. He said, I don't agree. He said, because we are all fallen and you have accepted us due to your attribute of being the savior of the most fallen. And this is well known throughout the entire world. So you know, Lord Chaitanya is presenting this argument. I have to be equally disposed. I have to see everyone the same. And then Haridas, he says, I don't agree. He says, because we are really fallen souls. And you are Petit Pavan. You are the savior of the most fallen souls. Therefore, it's different. And then Lord Chaitanya, he says, and then Lord Chaitanya, he opens up a little bit more. He says, Haridas, Sanatan, please listen to me, because I am going to speak to you the way my mind is really attached to you. He said, Haridas and Sanatan, I think of both of you as my little boys to be maintained by me. And the maintainer never seriously takes, never seriously finds any fault of those people who he is maintaining. He said, I always consider you to be my little children. Then Lord Chaitanya gives a nice example. And he says that when a little child passes stool or urine that touches the body of the mother never hates the child. On the contrary, the mother takes so much pleasure in cleansing the child. And then Lord Chaitanya says, the stool and the urine of the child appear to be sandalwood paste for the mother. Similarly, when the foul moisture that oozes from the sores of Sanatan's body touches me, I have no hatred for that. And then Haridas says, Sir, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and you are most merciful. No one can understand what is going on in your deeply affectionate heart. And then Haridas recalled the situation of the leper, Vasudeva, that Lord Chaitanya embraced and his body, became perfect. And Lord Chaitanya said, Haridas, the body of a devotee is never material. It is understood to be transcendental and full of spiritual bliss. At the time of initiation, when the devotee fully surrenders to the service of the Lord Krishna accepts him to be as good as himself. So when we hear a statement like that, at the time of initiation, when a devotee fully surrenders to the service of the Lord, I think it becomes a little more obvious to us that initiation is not just a ceremony, but initiation is really the act of a devotee, fully surrendering to the service of the Lord, and then the Lord accepts him to be of his same nature. And Lord Chaitanya says, if I had hated Sanatana Goswami and not embraced him, I would have certainly been chastised for offenses to Krishna. Sanatana Goswami is one of the associates of Krishna. There could not be any bad odor coming from his body. In fact, the first day that I embraced Sanatana Goswami, I smelled the aroma of Chatusama. And Kaviraj Goswami explains that Chatusama is a mixture of sandalwood paste and musk and four elements, lotus. He said, I didn't smell anything bad, but because his body is transcendental, I smelled only this heavenly aroma. And then he told Sanatan, he said, Sanatan, so please listen to me. I'm telling you the truth. Do not be aggrieved. I love you very much. I don't see these sores on your body. I don't take offense to what you're doing. Stay with me for another year here in Jagannath Puri. and we will engage in Krishna consciousness together. And then what happened is Lord Chaitanya, he went over to embrace Sanatan again. Sanatan became so distressed, even though the Lord was telling him all these things. Sanatan became so distressed. But Lord Chaitanya embraced Sanatan, and when he finished embracing Sanatan, his body was perfect and radiant and golden and beautiful. And then when that happened, Haridas, he looked up and he said, now I can see this entire thing was just a lila created by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The Lord, he had Sanatan walk through the Jarikanda. The Lord had Sanatan drink that bad water so that he would get the sores on his body, so the Lord could actually explain his love for his devotees. He said, this is really the inconceivable behavior of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then Lord Chaitanya embraced Haridas, embraced Sanatan, and then he left. So Sanatan Goswami stayed for another year with Lord Chaitanya. And then when he left to go to Vrindavan, Kaviraj Goswami says the scene of the feelings of separation of Sanatan and Lord Chaitanya are so piteous of their love and separation. He said, I cannot describe in words in this book. So a very great devotee, Srila Sanatan Goswami, and his tests that he undertook, and the unalloyed and unfaltering love that was shown to him by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Lord Chaitanya is the Karuna avatar. He is the avatar of divine mercy. He is the avatar of love. Namo Mahabharanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namni Gaur Tapashe Namaha. He is most merciful. He has come to give us the greatest gift of the love of the residents of Goloka Vrindavan through the process of chanting the holy names of the Lord. Therefore, we should try to become sincere devotees of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We should keep in mind points that Lord Chaitanya made. One point that set Lord Chaitanya off a few times was, proper following of Vaishnava etiquette, always practicing Vaishnava etiquette very perfectly, no transgressions of Vaishnava etiquette. And we should really make that a strong point in all of our association. Showing respect, showing love, showing honor, sincere practice of Krishna consciousness, and sincere sharing of Krishna consciousness with others. Okay, thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. And while we're all together, I would like to request all of the devotees to pray for all of our devotees in Ukraine and in Russia. Pray for the people of Ukraine. Pray for the people in Russia, that there will be auspiciousness, that they can have peace, that we will, they will always have the opportunity to engage in Krishna consciousness. And if any of you all would like to assist the devotees inside of Ukraine, you can go to shareyourcare.com, and it will transfer you to an ISKCON website where you can make donations. Devotees in Ukraine are, by Krishna's mercy, many have left. Many have safely made it to Europe. They're in neighboring countries. I know that in New Brajadam in Hungary, they're packed with Vaishnavas who have left Ukraine. And devotees have tried, some devotees are staying in Kyiv. Other devotees have moved to the western side of Ukraine. And I have one disciple who's a real hero, and he lives in Donetsk, and that is the area of Ukraine where this conflict began 8 years ago, and it's carrying on now, as well as throughout Ukraine. His name is Rohini Nandan. And I spoke to him the other day, and I said, "How's the situation?" And he said, "Guru Maharaj," he said, "every day we're going out and we're distributing about 1,500 plates of prasad." And I said, "Do you have army that goes out with you and protects you when you do that?" He said, "No, Guru Maharaj." He said, we know that there are places that we can go. We go out there and we just distribute. He said, some days we give khichdi, some days we give buckwheat, some days, he said something else I can't remember now. He said, in bread, we just distribute to people. And he said, for 8 years of this conflict, devotees from all over the world, they've been sending Lakshmi. So we have foodstuffs, and we're able to serve the unfortunate in this way. And he said, by Krishna's mercy, he said, none of the devotees who live here have been affected yet. He said, and after I come back at the end of the day, he said, I make sure that I chant my japa and that I read Prabhupada's books and that we discuss Krishna with one another. So devotees need a lot of help in Ukraine. And you can go to shareyourcare.com and you can make donations through that site. And that will go directly to the devotees within Ukraine. I know that there are other websites that have been put up that people can donate to, and those donations will be going to assist devotees who have made it to Europe. But for those people who are still in Ukraine, it's Share Your Care. But everybody please pray for the safety and the security of all of the devotees in these countries. The devotees are so wonderful, and they really need prayers at this time. Okay, Jai Govinda, I think maybe I've gone too long.
No, Guru Maharaj. Thank you so very much, Guru Maharaj. It was a wonderful session. You spoke about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Karunavatara, and it's a opt, since we celebrated Gaur Purnima just 2 days ago. It was really a great message for all of us. And also, Guru Maharaj, we seek your blessings to cultivate this Vaishnava culture, in the exact way as you have said in the class, like we try to follow in the footsteps of Srila Sanatana Goswami by Vamasi Guru Maharaj. And also we work on this shareyourcare.com. We will spread this message among the devotee community. Whatever best possible, we will do it, Guru Maharaj. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I hope all of you all are staying well. And I hope that soon we can all meet again.
Sure, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Okay, good night to everybody from Vrindavan Dham. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Guru Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Dr. Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Guru
Waiting to
Maharaj.
see you again, Guru Maharaj.
Krishna Guru
soon.
Maharaj.
Krishna Guru Maharaj.
No problem.
Hare
Thanks a lot for
Krishna.
thanks for the lovely class, Guru Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Learn from.
Guru Maharaj ki jai.
Thanks a lot, Jagwan Prabhu, for organizing this class. Hare Krishna.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for organizing this. Yeah, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Jai
Krishna.
Govind Prabhu. Jai Govind Prabhu. I saw that you are taking notes while Guru Maharaj was talking. I think mainly on the points of the lessons which he has. Could you please share that with us right now or on the WhatsApp group?
Yeah. I'll type it out and I will send the bullet points, Mataji.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. But let me
Share
close
the link of recording as well, Prabhu.
Yeah, this already shared, Prabhu. The YouTube link already shared.